Hello my friends, Mina Geek here. In one of my past videos we checked out some modern games on a CRT monitor, and before we dive back into the distant past, I thought we'd make a pit stop in the recent past, specifically the year 2009, because I received this box filled with goodies from 2009, which was kindly donated by a friend of the channel. Inside this box we have a CPU that, back in its day, didn't cost a fortune but packed a serious punch. So, let's see what gaming was like in 2009 on some good old mainstream components. But what's in the box? We've got the following: the I/O shield for the motherboard, useless, I never use these things, but thanks anyway. A Creative ODG SE sound card. Then we have an ASRock A70 Extreme 3 motherboard with an AMD A70 chipset and socket AM3. And from what I remember, ASRock made some pretty decent boards back then, in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Anyway, it looks pretty cool, it even has some fancy bits and bobs on it. And in the socket there's an AMD Phenom II X4 955 Black Edition. So I'm going to take everything he sent to me, add a few extra stuff from my own stuff, and 2009 will want its gaming back. I'll be using the ODG SE sound card, which is a budget card from Creative. It supports EAX, but without hardware acceleration. Not that it matters much, because I'll be using Windows Vista, of course. I'll use 8GB of DDR3 RAM from Gael, with, you know, frequencies and latencies. Like I've said, this is the ASRock motherboard, and it supports the Phenom II X4, that's a 6-core CPU. Back in 2009, my friends. Back then, Intel was still playing with us, deciding whether to give us 4 cores or leave us with just 2. I actually had an ASRock motherboard myself around 2010 or so, an Extreme version 2, but for Sandy Bridge, and it was a really good and pretty affordable board. It has a ton of features, but for me the coolest thing is that it has power and reset buttons right on the motherboard itself, and it even has an LED display for diagnostics. How cool is that? And the star of the show and the brain of the entire operation, the CPU, a Phenom II X4 955 Black Edition. Legendary, I might say. Legendary because it had an unlocked multiplier, so you could give it a nice overclocking. The CPU had a cost of around $250 back in 2009, and it went head to head with Intel's i7 Nehalem processors. The CPU will be cooled by this Arctic Freezer Pro 64, the classic Freezer Pro you could say, which always did its job as a solid mainstream cooler. This is what you'd get back then if you wanted something other than the stock cooler and didn't want to spend a whole lot of money on it. For mainstream gaming in 2009, I've chosen a mainstream video card from 2009, obviously. A really good one, an Asus Radeon HD 5770. The card looks really nice, and as you'll see, it also has a pretty decent cooling system. I actually had a Radeon HD 4770 back in the day, and it was an amazing card, and I've played a lot of Wrath of the Lich King with it, but it's beside the point. Anyway. Since this is a video card and it has a cooler, I'm going to change the thermal paste. After struggling a bit to remove the screws, I found out that the paste wasn't hardened at all. But hey, better to know I've changed it than to have the card fry itself, right? I cleaned everything up properly. This is the die, a fine one I might add. A video card with a simple PCB that looks good, and an equally simple and nice looking cooler. Well done, Asus. But I had some problems with the CPU cooler. After applying new thermal paste, or rather after I threw some paste onto the die, it took me a while to mount the cooler. I don't know why. I haven't really had issues with this mounting system before. Maybe it wasn't quite that compatible with AM3, I don't know. But eventually I managed to secure it. But because I transformed into a brainless robot at 12 AM, I mounted the cooler the wrong way, upside down, and the top part was hitting the bottom. I mean the PCI slot next to the PCI Express one. Wonderful. So I took it off, switched it, turned it around, and finally I got it. It clicked into place. The big problem was that none of the power supplies I had around had PCI Express connectors for the video card. So I had to pull a power supply from one of my other computers. But before that, I decided to do a quick test. So I used my trusty GeForce 6600 Silent. Actually no, I used the G210 before that, but I think it's dead. RIP. I tried to post with 4GB of RAM and with 16GB, and it worked every time. Good. I messed around a bit in the UEFI BIOS, enabled and disabled settings as required, and I lowered the fan speed for the CPU cooler. I replaced the power supply with a Sirtec high power element smart 750 watts. And to complete my 2009 gaming rig, I chose to use this awesome Sitec Cyborg keyboard. It looks like something straight out of Star Trek. Along with its body, the Sitec Cyborg mouse. Both of these peripherals are from that era, the late 2000s. For the monitor, I picked this BenQ BL2400, which I bought myself back in 2010-2011, if I'm not mistaken, for the wonderful sum of 200 euros. It does 920 by 1080, has an IPS panel, it swivels on all axes, and it still works today. Nice. Also, my friends, I will deeply appreciate if you would click the subscribe and like buttons. It helps me and the channel a lot. Alright, gaming in 2009 wasn't just about games from that year, so I decided to start with 2006 and work our way up to 2009. Even though Oblivion came out in 2006, you couldn't really play it properly with all graphic settings maxed out back then. Not in 2007, not even in 2008. It wasn't until around 2009 that you had the hardware to roam through Cyrodiil smoothly, without little to no stutters and frame rate drops at every turn. Because, say it with me now, there's too much grass in Oblivion. I'm running the game with all settings maxed out at 1080p with HDR and no anti-aliasing. In the Imperial City, the game runs pretty well, over 60 FPS on average. But, the game being Oblivion, there are a lot of small stutters, and you can see this in the 1% lows. Actually, with Oblivion, you can't really test 1% lows properly because they'll always be low. The game is constantly loading the world, so it keeps stuttering. From my point of view, it's clear that Oblivion is limited by the power, or rather the speed of the CPU. This Phenom II is only 3.2 GHz, and even though it has 4 cores, Oblivion uses 2 at most. So you'd kind of need a CPU with faster single core speeds. As a result, the video card usage stays around 30-40%, which means the card could push more FPS, but the CPU isn't helping it out. When we go outside the city, because there's too much grass and a lot of vegetation in general, the video card starts to get used more, reaching around 60% usage. The video card's memory usage also goes up from 200 MB in the city to 300 MB out in the wilderness. Even though the frame rate is similar to the one in the city, the game feels much choppier.
Parcă nu mai frizează așa rău. Deci shadows alea pe copaci și pe iarbă sunt foarte nașpa. Oricum nu observ mare diferență. Mamă, dar câtă iarbă, fraților, câtă frunză, câtă iarbă. Bă, îmi putea să punem și pe puțin iarbă. Mă enervează că n-ai setare ca să setezi, cel puțin eu cred că n-ai, densitatea ierbii, ci doar view distance-ul.
Another game that came out way ahead of its time, Crysis. Because when it was released in 2007, it simply didn't run well on anything, and it still didn't run okay in 2009. I mean, it didn't run well for me on a GTX 1650 a few years ago, so yeah. And at 1080p with all settings on very high, I'm getting around 20 plus FPS, just like I said. The video card is at over 90% usage, with 800 MB of video memory used, which is close to the card's 1 GB maximum. And it looks like the CPU is also being used more heavily. It seems to be using all 4 cores, or at least 3. But the game looks absolutely stunning. These are 2017 graphics, not 2007. But it does not run well.
We ran into a KPA checkpoint up here. You're gonna need some firepower to get past it. Stock up on grenades if you can find them.
For a shooter, it runs really bad. I lowered the settings to high, and now we're having around 40 FPS. It's not great, but it's playable. The good part is that during combat, the frame rate doesn't drop that much, and the game doesn't stutter that much either. Next up, Need for Speed Pro Street, the last Need for Speed game that I actually liked. I knew Pro Street was a well optimized game, so I cranked everything to max and also used 4x anti-aliasing. And yes, the game runs flawlessly. 70 average FPS and 30 FPS for 1% lows. And as you can see, it's pretty much maxing out the resources. The video card is at 99% usage and it seems to be using all 4 CPU cores as well. Impressive. On the downside, the video card is reaching 82 degrees Celsius. That's hot. And I even changed the thermal paste. It seems to me that the fan isn't spinning fast enough, I don't know. But 80 degrees is a lot. Not enough to kill the card, but it should be around 70 degrees under full load for this video card in particular. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare runs excellently with everything maxed out and 4x anti-aliasing. The CPU is being used quite a bit, the video card is over 90% usage and we're getting over 100 FPS on average. I didn't play too much because it has that training mission at the beginning, and if there's one thing I hate in games, it's training missions. It's a shooter, my friend. There have been 1,000 others before it. You aim, you shoot. What training do you need? Fallout 3 is like a post-apocalyptic Oblivion, but a bit better optimized, although the video card usage doesn't go much above 70%. The game looks and runs great, I have no complaints. And it definitely doesn't stutter as badly as Oblivion. Also, the world of Fallout 3, in my opinion, is still absolutely brilliant and gorgeous. And now for a little game made in Romania, Hox. I haven't actually played this one before, but I played a ton of Hox 2 because I was a game tester for it. I'm using maximum settings with 4x anti-aliasing. The game has pretty decent graphics and runs flawlessly, though I kind of expect it to. I mean, apart from a few planes and some buildings, there's not much else on the map. Stalker Call of Pripyat has two big problems, besides the frame rate which isn't great. We'll get over that. It has a lot of stuttering and the textures don't roll properly. They look like being low resolution just a few steps away, which is very strange. Anyway, it's well known that the Stalker engine isn't that well optimized, especially since it doesn't even support dual core. So yeah, a game from 2009 that only rocks with a single core. The last game is Gothic 4, Reason 1, and yes, it runs. Definitely better than Gothic 3 ran on PCs when it first came out. Well done, Piranha Bytes, I hope you make more great games like this in the future. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed whatever this was. Thank you all for sticking until the end, and until next time, have fun and be nostalgic.